Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Medford Community Development Board. I'll be calling the meeting to order. Let's begin with some obligatory procedural matters. The hearing of the Medford Community Development Board is being conducted via remote means. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. A reminder that anyone who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by accessing the link that was included on the meeting agenda posted on the CF Medford website. If, despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access, we will post a recording of this meeting on the city's website as soon as possible. A reminder that given the remote nature of this meeting, tonight all votes from the board will be made by roll call. Please know that the project materials for all projects before the board can be viewed on the city's website at medfordma.org and by clicking on current city board filings. Amanda will provide the link in the chat. Roll call attendance. Vice Chair Emily Hedeman.
Present.
Peter Kaus.
Present.
Ari Fishman.
Present.
Pam Mariansky.
Present.
Sally Akiki.
Present.
Sharad Bajvacharya.
Present.
And myself, Jackie McPherson. And we want to welcome our newest member, Sharad, to the board.
Thank you very much.
We're excited to have you. Amanda, can you please introduce any staff on the call?
Absolutely. So just quickly, myself, Amanda Centrella, staff planner for the Office of Planning, Development, and Sustainability. With us, we also have director of our office, Alicia Hunt, as well as senior planner, Danielle Evans, and our graduate intern, Clem Doucette, sorry. And that's everybody.
Thank you, Amanda. The first item on our list tonight is a site plan review for 285 to 295 Middlesex Ave, known as H Mart. It's being continued from 8/2/23. As a reminder, this project is a re-tenanting of an existing structure, which was previously a gym at Town Line Plaza, and it was a grocery store. While all the board members can discuss the project, only myself, Ari, Emily, and Peter are eligible to vote on this item. I now invite the applicant to present their revised site plan and outline any changes that you'd like to highlight.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I remember last time I talked with Amanda and Danielle, my headphones did not work. So let me know if it stops working. I'm going to share my other screen. Can you see H Mart at Town Line Plaza?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So thank you for having us back before. As you mentioned, we're back in June to talk about H Mart coming to Town Line Plaza. So we've made some changes. We've done a lot of work with city staff. We heard what the board said, we heard what city staff said, and we're really excited about these changes. Given that it has been a little bit of time, I figured I'd just reorient everybody to the site. This is Town Line Plaza outlined in green with the Medford Malden city line through. So my favorite joke is it should be called City Line Plaza, not Town Line. This white line here shows where that is. And then H Mart is in the southernmost part of the site where Crunch Fitness used to occupy. Crunch relocated in March of 2022 to Broadway Plaza, one of our sister properties. This is zooming in on that area so you can see the MBTA lines, Middlesex Avenue, and again, H Mart outlined in red. As was mentioned, this is a reoccupancy of an existing structure. There is one site change that was previously proposed, skinning up this island right here to accommodate truck movements. We have since now come back and made more site improvements that I will walk through. Site pictures from before. So this is the building. This is approaching from the south. This is approaching the property, you know, if you continue at Middlesex Ave or you're approaching from the Malden side, Highland Ave. This is where John Burroughs was. They sadly just closed. Once you're within the property, this is the building that contains the future H Mart down here at the end. Stores with a covered walkway along, and a sea of parking that we're going to improve. And this is looking from the other side of the property. Crunch Fitness shown here is where H Mart is going. Behind the building, there's some significant parking. This is where the MBTA was staging for some work they previously did. And now I'll go into our updates since our last meeting. So this is the site plan. Hearing at the last meeting, a lot of comments about the pedestrian connectivity to the property and throughout the property. That's really where we focused our efforts. And then throughout conversations with staff, we've talked through traffic, we talked through and making some additional landscape improvements as well. So the landscape is what I will show first. This shows some of the existing landscaping on site in green, the light green here. And then this is showing where we've added some landscaping in the front of the property. I'll zoom in on this. I think I can zoom in. So this is the existing landscaped island that runs through the center of the property. Right here is where H Mart is going to be going. So we're proposing to add some landscaped islands really along the internal driveway. And then a couple throughout the center of the parking lot as well. And adding pedestrian connection, which I will show in a technical drawing in a minute. This is a previous drawing that we presented in June that had showed the change to the parking lot here to accommodate truck turns, and then the loading in the rear where we were striping. So it was very minimal changes at the time. And we heard the comments loud and clear about improving pedestrian connectivity, improving landscaping. So this is the updated drawing, which I will zoom in on in a minute, but overview. From the large parking fields behind the building, we have added a pedestrian path that's striped with bollards to protect it, to encourage people to park back here and allow a route from the rear parking to the front entrance of the building. This is the technical drawing showing the landscape improvements that I'll zoom in on in a minute. We have also shown striping added to all the crosswalks at the front of the property. Places where there are not handicap ramps today, we are proposing those. All of the work along the front of the property is not on our land, it's Mass DOT's land. So it's subject to their review and approval, but we're going to work with them on that. We've shown increased striping throughout. We, in adding some landscaping through here and adding a new sidewalk, we had to relocate some handicap spaces. So we've added them proximate to the front entrance of the building. And then these are showing the landscape islands. So I will now zoom. We've also added additional bike racks. That was one of the other comments previously. And we will add wayfinding signage to direct both customers and employees that there is more parking behind the building. And we already require employees to park in the rear. We're a little lax on that admittedly right now as the part of the property is vacant, but it's something that we will encourage and enforce going forward. So you can see here, we're adding in concrete to get from the existing sidewalk up into our land. Then we're striping pedestrian access across. And then we're adding in a brand new sidewalk that goes all the way through the heart of the property. This caused us to lose some parking along here. We had originally shown some one-way spaces, but after reviewing with Director Blake, he had the great suggestion to just keep it entirely parallel parking along here, so it's not confusing for the customer. With doing that, we were actually able to widen the landscaping through here a little bit. So we picked up some additional landscaping here. We've added trees, and we've added trees where we could throughout. So there's trees added here. Places where the landscaping was not quite wide enough, we're going to add shrubs and bushes. And then throughout, we're going to improve the ground cover in here. So it won't just be mulch. We'll add some more taller grasses and things like that that are hardy, but add visual relief. You can see some added striping. This is showing more detail on the crosswalks. And then the bike racks on the sidewalk. This is the landscape island that has always been proposed to be shifted. This is just showing the landscaping in more detail. And you can see here the bollards that are along the pedestrian walkway. And because I'm extremely visible, my colleague Janessa Gonzalez helped put together these images. So if you're at the property, you can kind of see where the greenscape is going. So we're adding a landscaped island in the middle, out front of Omni Dentist, to help orient you. This shows one of the areas that's striped today that we're going to convert to landscaping. This is my favorite. This is showing where the concrete walk is being added. So this will be a sidewalk that runs all the way basically along this landscape island. It jogs slightly because in order to keep the parallel parking, which is going to be throughout here, there's parallel existing today, and then it's perpendicular. This is going to be entirely parallel. We've added landscaping between where we had to make some jogs, but then we kept it as tight to the left as we could so that we could really add any additional landscaping here. Obviously, the larger the landscaping, the better the planted material will do. So we're almost doubling the width towards the top. And then today there's not landscaping at the top of the island, and we're going to add that at the top and the bottom as well. This is that view if you've walked through and you're looking back. So showing the increased landscaping width along here. The dark gray is where the pedestrian sidewalk will be, and then the landscaping at the ends, fixing this kind of funky design right here. These spaces were shown as handicapped, so these are the ones that we're relocating to the side of the building as well. And this shows the other island being converted from striped to landscaping. We had the technical drawings, if anybody has questions later. And then the truck route that the truck will navigate through the property that showed you know, once we've relocated this island and nudged it up a little bit with the loss of one space, the truck will be able to maneuver in the site. So that shows all of our improvements. We're really excited about this, and we hope that the board as well, and would love to talk through any questions or comments.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Ms. Weatherby. I can definitely appreciate you discussing and bringing in some of the board and staff's concerns regarding pedestrian and vehicle pedestrian connectivity and vehicle circulation. So thank you for that. But before we deliberate with the board, I'm going to actually open it up to the public. I will ask the city staff if there's any questions there, if there's any comments from the city staff before opening up to the public.
I don't think I have anything. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Danielle.
Madam Chair, in our staff memo, we incorporated some conditions that don't appear on the plans. It seems the engineering department, a city engineer, is requiring that all heaved and cracked sidewalk panels be replaced. That's not reflected on the plans here, and I want to make sure that the applicant is aware of that condition.
So thank you, Danielle. So both the heaved and cracked sidewalks, which I believe were on Middlesex Ave, and the crosswalks here, when we reviewed with staff previously, we had shown striping. We didn't pick up that they wanted to add the concrete. We are willing to do that on the two Medford entrances. And then in terms of the heaved and cracked sidewalks, the ones that we saw were actually where the ramps will be added for the parking spaces. So those will be updated as part of this project. We're happy with those conditions. The only thing we just request being changed is that it says subject to Mass DOT approval, because it's not our land, so we can't guarantee that we can do it. We're willing to do it. We want to do it. We just have to work with them on it.
And as far as you had mentioned that you were going to add native plants such as shrubs. Can you go into detail a little bit more outside of the new shade trees that that you planned on adding? I didn't catch anything outside of shrubs, and I wanted to make sure
I didn't provide detail. We are going to work with city staff on making sure they're native plants. We've had some struggles here on property with the plants surviving. We've been told that the plants that have been installed at Wegmans actually have done a really good job. So it's something that we had talked with Amanda and Danielle about, getting a list of plants from staff, incorporating those. They're not shown on the plans right now because it's something we're doing throughout the property, but they will be native plants and they will be coordinated with the staff, which I think was also one of the conditions.
Yes, prior to the final selection, you would need to coordinate it with the city staff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Danielle, did you want to highlight anything else?
Oh, I just wanted to add that I did reach out to our, to Aggie Tuden, who is the tree warden, in the, I think that's her title, or the director of forestry. She had been out on an extended leave, so wasn't able to respond to my request to weigh in on native plantings, but once they're at the stage of, you know, selecting plants, I'll be sure to have some recommendations. So we weren't able to have any at this time.
Thank you.
And then there was parking demand, to reduce the cruising for parking. Are you able to mandate that the employees park in the rear as suggested previously?
Yes, it's included in all of our tenant leases that they need to park where we tell them.
Okay.
We have the opportunity to change that as the property sees fit. So we will be mandating that they park in the rear.
And so they're parking in the rear, but you'll still leave it open, like wayfinding signs for the actual customers to realize that there's parking back there too?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So I'm still sharing the screen, right? So this parking back here will be encouraged for employees, but it won't, customers will also be allowed to park in the back as well. So the signage will be added along the front saying additional parking behind the space.
Okay.
We still need to design that.
And also, thank you very much for answering that. There was a question whether or not that there was an existing connection to the state's MWRA connection. Do you anticipate there being any problem with that process if it's not?
We don't anticipate that, but we do understand if there's a change in what's shown, we'll need to re-review with either staff or the board at that time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Are there any other questions from city staff or from the board at this point? I'll open it up to the board if none from the city.
I've got a question. Have you done a turning movement study for the trucks on this in this location? My worry is, since you have been adding some landscaping there, especially the one on the bar, like the new one that you just added, landscaping island to be redesigned. I feel like the truck's gonna run over that and create a big patch. Like, is there a turning movement study of some sort?
So we did trucks entering and leaving the property, and that was actually the one island that we had shown originally moved because the truck was clipping the island.
Yep.
And so that's why we are previously proposing to just shift that one portion of the island up. All the improvements that we're making are not in areas that were impacted by the truck movement, so we felt really great about that. We were initially concerned about ADA spaces with the additional islands, so we had to relocate some of them, which you see down here, in order to add the islands, but they're not in areas that were impacted by the truck movement. Also, this is something that, okay.
I have a few questions, unless you had more, Sharad.
No, please go forward.
Sure. Catherine, I really appreciate the approach that your team has taken with the crosswalks, the landscaping, the additional islands. I think that's just what we were looking for, you know, with some of the suggestions. So I really appreciate that. I see that you guys relocated the accessible spaces to the side of the building. What sort of lighting is at that corner? Because I can just see, like, you know, thinking of myself as an employee running late for work, you know, speeding around that corner, or, you know, truck driver trying to make delivery times, or, you know, customer trying to get, you know, that one last dinner ingredient, and moving fairly quickly, you know, over that crosswalk. I don't know if there's a way to like add additional lighting or potentially raise the crosswalk. or if that's even in our scope of stuff we're allowed to ask for, but just want to like throw some attention on that shift with the crosswalk and the space movement.
Yeah, happy to talk through a couple things. There's no special lighting over here, but this is the entranceway, which is a glass vestibule, so that actually provides a little bit
Okay.
more ambient light in the area. This is a covered walkway. If we, are noticing that there's an issue, we can add a building light in this side, but we would of course want to make sure it's not casting too much light onto the neighbors or things like that. The front parking lot has lighting, as does the back parking lot have overhead lights. This will also be fully striped. And so the entire area will be the white striping that kind of stands out a little bit more, as will this area along here. I wouldn't want to do a raised crosswalk in this area because of the trucks. Deliveries will be usually off hours, and there'll be a lot of activity, and so it can just cause a little bit of wear and tear on that. And we are also keeping some parking, ADA parking that's in the front of the space. So it was just the two that were actually further away from the store that were previously right here. We have existing ones here, here, and down here. So they're kind of evenly spread out. There's now a higher concentration towards the store.
Okay.
But I do want to just also ensure everything that's shown as grayed out will be striped to the same level. This is just showing existing versus proposed. So, making sure that all these crosswalks are striped in like a really visible white paint to provide pedestrian safety.
That's really helpful. Thanks for pointing out the spots that are staying. I must have overlooked those. So I appreciate your responses.
They're not as in your face, I know, with the gray.
That's why we ask the questions.
Yeah. Did that answer everything? Sorry, I know you had a couple of questions.
That was it. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? I actually have a final question. I wasn't sure, Ms. Weatherby, if there was going to be a food court of some sort that was proposed inside of the store.
Yes. I'm sorry, my previous presentation had pictures from inside the store, and I can send that over after. But yes, I believe they have a food court inside the store, like their other locations.
So can you just reiterate your trash and litter mitigation for the site, especially for this having a food court?
Sure. So they've added additional dumpsters in the rear. And as a food operator, both as grocery store and then somebody that's, quasi restaurant, there's additional state requirements in terms of food waste. So that's why there's a lot more dumpsters in this area. Previously, there was only one dumpster that serviced this entire building. Other tenants have their own individual dumpsters as well. So these ones that are shown are entirely for H Mart. And they'll work. I know there were a bunch of comments from the Board of Health. Those will all be coordinated through the building permit process because their permit drawings show a lot more detail.
Thank you for answering.
If I follow up, thank you. If I may follow up on that, I appreciate the answer about the dumpster. Can you also speak a little bit about consumer and food court patrons who might be coming and kind of as they're walking out to their cars or kind of eating outside? Can you talk about trash mitigation in the parking area and sidewalks? Thank you.
Course. So we have a couple existing, what I call pedestrian trash cans. So obviously like for people walking by, scattered throughout the sidewalk. There is a fair amount of trash on site today. So we do anticipate adding 1 to 2 more trash cans as needed. I think it's going to be very, very popular. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's 2. It's one of the things, there is some existing. And so we kind of see, we have day porters that are there every single day emptying the trash, and they're on top of it, both throughout the parking lot and along the sidewalk. And so we have some there today. We anticipate adding more as needed, and something we want to stay on top of as well too, because we know customers don't want to come to a dirty property either.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments from the board, I will now open it up to the public. I skipped ahead a little bit earlier. And I'll open up the public comment period by stating that those who wish to provide comments can use the raise hand feature or message Amanda in the comments. You can also send an email to ocd@medford-ma.gov. Before providing your comments, please state your name and address for the record. A reminder to all meeting participants to please refrain from using the chat function to provide comments, as it is not part of the public record. However, if a participant is having audio or other technical difficulties, this may be entered into the chat to alert myself and staff. Amanda, can you please manage the public comment queue and read any previously sent emails or letters?
Absolutely. So we didn't have any previously received comments or letters. I am refreshing our inbox now. And just a reminder, folks can use the raise hand feature, or if you're having trouble finding that, you can use the chat function just to identify yourself. So I'll give folks maybe a minute or two just to respond to that while I check the email. Okay, so no new emails. And I'm not seeing any hands or messages in the chat. I'm just going to skim through and see if anybody's sort of waving their hands on the screen or anything like that. But I think we're good.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment period and we're going to go back to board deliberation. This is where we decide whether or not we are going to approve, deny, or approve with conditions. I want to test the board and just see where you wanted to start off with any conditions. I can name a few that I know that that we will need to go over, but does anyone have anything to add or any questions that they want to cover at this time? Or any clarifying questions that they want from Ms. Weatherby? Right, let's discuss some conditions and see if we can actually get this going so that we can possibly get to an approval. If that's okay with the board, and to see if we can pretty much deliberate on that. For one, there was some new, in addition to the shade trees that the proponent has showed us, there was a discussion of some native plantings to make sure that the parking lot would be, the heat island effect would be reduced off the parking lot with impervious materials. And the proponent has already said that they will be working with city staff to determine final selection of that. That would be a condition I would impose.
A quick question, Jackie,
Yes.
just before we got too many conditions. Okay, Amanda just answered me. I just wanted to confirm who was drafting the conditions.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
I apologize. Usually Amanda acting in the realm of clerk. As of right now, Amanda, I just want to clarify that you are going along with are you recording our conditions?
Yes. So I took some notes from the previous meeting, and also in this case as well, although I feel like most of them are actually captured by PDS staff. Had drafted a couple of conditions that were put in the most recent revised memo, which of course not obligated to take up, but as a point of reference for you all.
Yes, and so to clarify on my end, I'm reading what PDS staff has provided us with, and I want to see how the board feels about these conditions, and if you want to adopt them to go forward for approval. And the first one would be, in addition to the new shade trees, we're talking about native planting such as the flowering shrubs that Ms. Weatherby has already discussed. If the board is okay with that approval.
Yeah, I
or
think
with
that
that
would make
condition.
sense.
Do you need me to send those to you, Emily? Do you have them in front of you, or can you find?
I think they're in the folder, right?
Yeah, it's in the,
Yeah.
yeah.
You want me
And
to
then
stop sharing my screen? Would it be helpful for you guys to put them on screen, or actually have them if you want me to put them on screen?
Sure, that would be helpful. I'm visual enough.
See if I can do some. Oh, no, I don't have the conditions, sorry.
Okay, so I'll just go through, and as discussed, in order to meet customer parking demand and reduce cruising for the parking behavior, which creates congestion and reduces pedestrian safety, employees and staff will be required to park in the rear parking lot, as well as wayfinding signs be provided to make customers aware of the availability of the rear parking.
Yeah, that one makes sense to me. It sounds like the applicant is already willing to do that.
Agreed.
And of course, the proposal will comply with the requirements of the fire chief's memo dated 6/2 during the original comment period, 6/2/2023 from the department head.
Yes, and we also confirmed that the drive aisles all meet the requirements too.
And in accordance with the city engineering comments in their memo dated 6/2/2023, the heaved and cracked panels of the sidewalk along Middle Avenue must be replaced in conformance with city standards.
So that one and the next one, we're just, we're request adding, subject to Mass DOT review and approval as it's their land.
Okay,
And that should read Middlesex. I think I cut and paste his comments.
Middlesex, yes, okay.
Yeah. That doesn't get caught in spell check.
And this for public, this is for public purposes. I'll read out. In accordance with the city engineering comments in their memo dated 6/2/2023, driveway apron must be reconstructed to ensure conformance with MAAB regulations, particularly in regard to cross slopes, widths, and accessible paths. The accessible walkway, which is a sidewalk, should cross the apron via Portland cement concrete panels. And then the final one that we had was just to ensure that trash and litter mitigation for the site, especially with there being a food court, and you said you would work with the Board of Health on that.
Yeah, so just to clarify, there's two items with that. The tenant works with the Board of Health on all their internal and their personal use. We provide locations on site where they can do it, and then they have to dispose of their own waste that they generate inside and anything with loading and service. And then we as the landlord will handle the pedestrian trash, all the on-site cleanup. So just wanted to make that clear. It's, both parties are willing to do it, but administered in two different ways.
So you'll just work with the Board of Health on appropriate trash and litter mitigation for those items. Does the board have any other, for one, do we accept all these conditions as is, or does the board have anything to add or subtract? If none,
I'll make a motion to approve the conditions as stated.
is there a second?
I'll second it with the kind of addition of the in collaboration with Mass DOT. Yep.
Yes, and that would be part of one of the conditions.
Mhm.
Or actually two, so that's all encompassing. So the site, so a roll call for acceptance of the site plan review, site plan approval with conditions as stated. I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Emily Hederman,
Aye.
Peter Cowles,
Peter, you're on mute.
Aye.
Ari Fishman,
I, with a lot of excitement for future shopping.
Pam Mariansky,
Yes.
Oh,
Sally.
sorry to interrupt.
I know.
Apologies, Chair. I think the only eligible members to vote are Ari,
Oh.
yourself, Emily, and Peter.
Yes, that's right. And I actually said that at the beginning, and I'm so used to doing roll call. I apologize. We're gonna go back. New board members are not eligible because of you were not part of the board at the time that the public hearing was opened. So we are going to go back and start over. Just for clarity,
I
Vice
don't
Chair.
know, you need to, everybody voted yes, right? Aye. So
Jackie did not vote yet.
I was gonna say only the ones that are eligible, you just count those votes.
You count those votes, yes. And then roll call because it's remote. So just for clarity, I will go back. Vice Chair Emily Hedman,
Aye.
Peter Cowes,
Aye.
Ari Fishman,
Aye.
and myself, Jackie McPherson's an aye. Your site plan has been approved with the conditions as stated. Ms. Weatherby, thank you so much for your presentation and for your time here.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're excited to bring H Mart as well.
Yes. We're excited to have you. Well, to have H Mart.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so the next item on the list tonight is special permit for 3850 Mystic Valley Parkway, which is Bank of America. It was continued from 7/19/23. The applicant is in the processes of revising the plan documents for the board's review and has requested a continuance. I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this item to the next board meeting, which is a date certain on 9/6/23.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Roll call. Vice Chair Emily Hedman,
Aye.
Peter Cowes,
Aye.
Ari Fishman,
Aye.
Pam Mariansky,
Aye.
Sally Akiki,
Aye.
Sharad Barachara,
Aye.
and myself, Jackie McPherson's aye. So it's been moved to 9/6/23, and our next item on the list is petition referred from City Council for zoning ordinance amendments, which is continued from 8/2/23. I'm going to invite Danielle Evans, which is Senior Planner for the city, to present any changes to the amendment to the board.
Thank you. Let me find. Sorry. Teresa's headphones were talking from the corner of the room. Did you all have a chance to look at the revised staff report?
I did, but I unfortunately did not have a chance to watch the video, so I don't believe I'm eligible to decide on this. Is that correct?
Amanda, have you been keeping track of, okay, so it was the last meeting was when the public hearing was opened. So everyone who was at that meeting, unless someone, listened and attested to having read them or watched the meeting. So I think Peter, were you able to?
The only thing I knew I needed to watch and attest to was the H Mart one.
Okay.
Okay, so then in that case, Peter and Emily, it sounds like you can be part of discourse, but not eligible to vote on this item. And Sharad as well, you weren't part of the board quite yet when this was opened, so able to be part of discourse, but not eligible to vote on this item.
Sounds good.
Thanks for clarifying, Amanda.
Mhm.
Sorry, why am I?
So while you're getting the document open, the background here for everybody and for any members of the public who are watching tonight is that the city council had some changes they wanted to make to the table of use and parking regulations that around particularly motor vehicle uses in a particular district. And they were aware that from the zoning recodification, there were a number of other changes that we were recommending that are generally minor in nature, some of which are actually, one is an unintended consequence, a few are some clarifications, one is a correction that does not fall in the realm of Scrivener's error, although you could argue it. And so they asked us to put together a list and a packet of changes that are not wholesale, let's change up all of Medford zoning. That is the plan moving forward. We're looking to hire a consultant to do that, but rather more, I would sort of say, administrative changes that are straightforward and easy for people to understand overall. And so we as staff, and we provided those to the counselors who reviewed them, agreed that yes, they would like to be the proponent on those. So these were officially put on the city council agenda by Councilor Bears and Councilor Carviello. And then they are legally referred to the CD board. So they must refer them to this board for a public hearing and comment. You make recommendations to the city council, and then they have a public hearing on it and they vote on the changes. Over the course of that, we have also, this was a public hearing that opened at the last meeting. And we have also since then sent these to legal counsel for the city. They had some language changes on some of them. Mostly they work with us on the form of things to make sure they're presented correctly. And so we've incorporated all of that. And then, so Danielle, did you get the document open? Did you want to present the changes tonight from what?
Yeah,
I think it's clear that the board can make any recommendations on these they want. When we give a memo to the council, what we're going to say is, this one that you sent us, we agree with. This one that you sent us, we recommend these changes, right? And then they may or may not take the changes that come out of this board. So.
okay, so I'm sharing my screen so it's easier to follow along. And again, this is in the packet under the immediate zoning changes, I think is what we've been calling it, also pre-phase 2 changes. So these are the motor vehicle related uses that originated in city council. Basically, let's just changing some of these Ys, by right to special permit, and city council elected to make themselves the special permit granting authority. Alicia, did you mention if we should be
on that one? I would say that I've discussed with some of the counselors who should be the special permit granting authority. And it's actually unusual that a city council is a special permit granting authority. That's sort of historic, how it has always been here in Medford. But it's a better practice to have the planning board be the special permit granting authority, because you would be looking at the comprehensive plan and planning considerations, and you all are not elected, so you don't have to do things based on whether or not you're going to get voted or voted out of office for making those decisions. So if you were amenable, our recommendation from the office is actually to change these from being, and we would stick to the one column that they're already addressing, which is the C2 zone, and to recommend that instead of making, because they're changing the yeses to special permit and special permit city council, if you all wanted to make that special permit CD board as a recommendation, they would be open to hearing that. So.
Is this the one related to like keeping certain uses off of places like Mystic Avenue, correct?
Right. So this particularly, these changes they put forward are the C2 district, which is Mystic Ave.
Okay.
That is, everybody knows Mystic Ave.
Yes.
Or do I need to be more clear about that? Sorry.
So
Okay.
to me, just quickly, it does make sense that the planning board, as Daniel has already outlined and yourself has already outlined, Alicia, that we see things more holistically and with the city's vision. I guess it comes to one of those things where I feel like it should be an elected board that is the special permit granting agency, but, I mean, authority, but if you're saying that you want going, I can definitely see what you mean. I guess I had some hesitations before because it almost looked like we were trying to keep certain uses out on purpose. But if it's because you want it to be looked at more holistically, I just wanted to clarify that with the board that it just, as you said, it makes sense that we're actually looking at it at the city's vision.
Right. Well, for example, they're not planners. They could be any experience. And on the board, we tend to have planners, engineers, transportation experts, you know, land use people, architects, people who understand how different uses interact with each other, what are the impacts of traffic and stuff. And elected officials could have any background at all. And what they know is who's yelling loudest at them. And when you're making a decision about what is an appropriate use, is it really the people who are living next door to it who should decide, or a bigger view of the community? And for example, there are people who are objecting to a multifamily building that is a block from the new train station because they're used to their neighborhood. They like it the way it is, and they don't want a denser neighborhood, but it's a block from a new train station, right? And that's a really appropriate use, and we need to be increasing density around train stations. So if you were to leave a decision like that to an elected board, they might bow to like, oh, the people who've lived there don't like it, right? And that's where, and I will say in this case, yes, last night, actually, they voted to approve that. But that's the sort of the risk, and that's why looking at it, and you never want to look at who are the actual individuals on a city council or a zoning board or a planning board at this moment. When we make changes to zoning, even though we know that we're planning to rezone in the next year or two, you need to think about if this is the way it's going to be for the next 20 or 30 years. We're not thinking about who is on the board now, but who's going to be on the board in 8, 10, 15 years from now.
And
right?
who's obligated to do, to get the city's highest and best use for a site, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
I would be inclined to support the motion to switch it to be the planning board. I can imagine in 10 years, it being this one exception where all permits are with the planning department, except for motor vehicles, and that like an unnecessary bit of absurdity, even if we understand where it's coming from now. That feels like it should be compatible with other decisions.
Yes. Same.
Yes, also as a traffic engineer who's worked in private development, it was kind of a surprise to me to come to this board and see exactly how much approval the city council needs to have, when in most municipalities where I've worked, it already is the planning board that makes most of these decisions.
That was also one of the things that surprised me the most when I came to Medford was, well, what does the licensing commission do and what does the planning board do? Because all the power for those decisions seem to rest in city council. And I know there's, you know, all this talk about charter review and who has power and who doesn't. But I think if folks haven't seen how it works elsewhere, what is normal, then they don't realize that Medford's an outlier in this respect. So
Yeah, and building off that point, Danielle, I think regardless of, you know, who is doing the deciding, you know, the city council, you know, is influential to our codes, as you can see here with these changes. So as long as we, the community development board, are, you know, implementing the codes and, you know, reviewing per our jurisdiction, then, you know, we're just kind of following their direction. So yeah, I think it makes sense, but, you know, I'm not able to vote, but I agree with what you guys are saying.
So in addition to these, so this came from the city council, and our office thought, well, while we're at it, You know, it's not just, you know, car sales lots that are banging down the door. I also get lots of calls from warehouses and self-storage and other undesirable uses that are getting kicked out of some of our neighboring communities, like they're coming from Cambridge and Somerville or Arlington. They're looking for new homes and they're coming to Medford because we allow them by right. And so until we're able to redraw our boundaries and decide where some of these uses could go by right, I think that an extra layer of, you know, it's this discretionary review is warranted. So parking area or garage, you're not accessory to a permitted principal use. So basically like the parking lots along Mystic Ave that are rented out for school bus storage, that kind of stuff's by right now. I don't think we want more parking lots to store school buses. So I think that should be at least a special permit to say, is this spot an appropriate location? So we switch those from yeses, which are by right, to the CD board, across the board for that. And then also added, so the wholesale, transportation, and industrial uses, added a few more to be special permits. In those cases, I think most of these we flipped to Board of Appeals to be consistent with what board is already providing that relief. Let's see, the fuel and ice sales switched from by right to needing a special permit in the C2. Then warehouse, wholesale establishment, and mini or self-storage warehouse. We have a lot of self-storage, a lot in Medford. I was joking around that at some point I want to do a study of how many self-storage facilities we have, like per capita in Medford compared to our budding communities, because I guarantee we have more. So I think that those should not be something that can just come in by right, but a special permit. See if it's an appropriate use for the location. And so those would be going to Board of Appeals unless anyone has any opinion on whether it shouldn't be them. And I was just trying to be consistent with who is the SPGA for this use category in general. And then for accessory uses, the only one in here that I switched was open storage. Change that to not being by right to being the Community Development Board, because right now it's allowed by right in the C2, and I don't think we need open storage being able to go wherever they want. So those were the changes with that. Does anybody have any questions about the additional uses that we added? Basically, we were going by, the comprehensive plan was our guiding document for which uses are what we're trying to see in Medford in certain areas of the city, and then what those areas of the city are currently zoned, and then making the changes based on that. So it wasn't like an arbitrary, we're just gonna flip this Y to a CD special permit. There was a process that we went through to come up with that. Should I move on?
Yes.
And so the second one is multiple principal structures on a lot. In the most recent recodification, it was changed to not allow multiple principal dwellings or structures anywhere except the mixed use zone. And that caused a lot of unintended consequences. And now all of our, like some of the shopping centers are now non-conforming, and the housing authority properties are non-conforming. And they're in the middle of trying to rehabilitate their projects, and all of a sudden what they wanted to do wasn't allowed anymore, to have, you know, multiple principal structures. So we want to rectify that and make that something that is allowed everywhere in the city, in any zone, except in the 2 single-family zones, the SF1 and SF2, along with the general residential zoning district, except by special permit, because, you know, depending on the circumstances of the lot, it might be completely appropriate to have 2 principal structures rather than 1 massive structure. It'll be very, you know, context specific. So by special permit would allow that to be evaluated. And that special permit would rest with the community development board.
By definition, an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, is not considered a principal structure, correct? Okay, great.
And then the third was the second associate member for the Board of Appeals, and to clarify the length of the term. We modified this slightly from what you saw at the last public hearing to update the form to make it more clear per legal counsel. So it's the point of this is to stagger the term, so 1 member shall expire each year and to allow the 2 associate members. And the correcting the unintended additional referrals to the CDB. During the recodification, the findings, so that the section 6 findings under chapter 40A, they hadn't been classified as special permits in the last ordinance, so they were just going to the zoning board to meet for non-conforming structures and uses to modify them. But in the recent recodification, they were called special permits, and we have requirements in the ordinance that say that all special permits have to be referred to the CD board, and I don't think that was the intention. These are very minor things that shouldn't require referral, but it wouldn't preclude them. So if the city council and Board of Appeals really wanted the CD board to weigh in, then they could. There's nothing that stops them from doing it, but they wouldn't be required, which would be what the process was before the recodification. So it's one of those situations of an unintended consequence. And so we specify special permits as required by the table of use and parking regulations. And then number 5, I think I'm going to skip over this because this is more complicated and will require some more discussion. So I'll get to that at the end. For number 6 is updating the inclusionary housing provisions. Right now, there's provisions that requires a special permit to provide the inclusionary housing, which doesn't make sense and is some cities and towns have this, but many that I worked in have not. It's something that you need to comply with. So I think it's unnecessary because of all projects that trigger inclusionary zoning are subject to site plan review. So they are reviewed and there can be conditions and there's oversight. And also for 3A zoning, we cannot have special permits in there. And currently our inclusionary housing ordinance is being studied, having an economic feasibility analysis done on it to make sure that we can use it. And if there's anything in there saying special permits are required, then that will complicate the rezoning for 3A. So basically this just goes through, you know, deleting mentions of needing special permits, switching DHCD to Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities to reflect the new name change, adding site plan review authority, One thing that I did add was that regarding the provisions is that the number of bedrooms of the affordable units shall be proportionate to that of the market rate units. That wasn't expressly called out. So I would, strongly suggest and pseudo require developers do that, but there's nothing in the ordinance that actually said that. So I wanted to make it quite obvious, because when it was getting time to get the affordable units approved and submitted to the state, I would get floor plans to look at, and it'd be like the 1 bedrooms, and it's like none of the 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. Like, well, you can't do that. It had the percentage of units, but they weren't with the bedroom counts. That they weren't proportionate in that way.
I think that's a great change, Danielle.
Yeah, so we expressly called that out.
And I don't, Danielle, I
pardon
don't want to cut you off, but if you had referred to 3A, and I don't know if you wanted to just for public purposes at this point, it sort of explain that 3A is related to the Multi-Housing Act or the Zoning Act.
Yeah, and I'll also have I believe you put an agenda item on this of an update of the city's process of that. But yes, for the public listening, chapter 40A has a new section 3A that was passed by the state legislature, and regulations or guidelines were put out by DHCD, now EOHLC, of how to implement those. And that was that multifamily housing must be allowed by right within a half a mile of transit stations or MBTA communities. And we are an MBTA community, specifically a rapid transit community. So we have the quickest timeline to get this done. So we want to make sure that we're not passing zoning that wouldn't comply. And this seemed like an opportune time to fix that.
So they have an inclusionary housing previously by special permit, which didn't pretty much make sense since should be mandatory for the SHI. That would be in conflict with the 3A rule, correct?
Right,
With the 3A
yeah.
laws. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so basically that just, just cleans it up. That's all the strikeout is about the special permit.
Okay.
And then just kind of wordsmithing it. And yeah, this is, as I said before, everywhere in the document, switching DHCD to EOHLC as we have been directed to. And then the definitions that were in the individual sections were, the intention was for them to have been moved to a complete definition section, but they got dropped and they were never added. And we want to restore them back to their individual sections, because it's actually when they're read outside of the individual section for which they're applied to, I think it introduces confusion. And a lot of the definition sections actually are pretty important and aren't necessarily like specific as like a condition, but telling you like who's the SPGA for this section. And so until we can do a comprehensive audit of all our definitions, I think it's best not to move them and to put them back. And so that was like the affordability, all of the inclusionary housing definitions got dropped, which is all of these, which are really important when understanding what the requirements are of that section, rather than having to flip all the way to the end of the ordinance to read them. Reinserting the language for linkage, so all of the linkage definitions, putting those back in. So the parks and recreation, police and fire, roads and traffic, and water and sewer facilities linkage definitions were dropped. And then, so those are all, pardon my scrolling. The adult use marijuana establishment definitions, those were dropped. So we'll put those, I don't have them listed here because I don't think I actually had them handy. And then the solar energy definitions also got dropped. And I believe signage, which I don't think I even have a copy of, but it would be the old signage definitions, putting them back.
Danielle, can I interrupt for 1 second? I just want to make a technical, not any disagreement with Danielle. I want to make a technical clarification to the board. So what's here in front of us is what the council had on their list to make changes or to, so all of this is deleted from the zoning. It's not like, oh, we're right. I just want to, we're not moving them out of the end area. When the recodification happened, they forgot to put them into the end. So they're literally not anywhere in our zoning right now. And we're basically bringing them back out. The city council sent us this list. However, the adult use marijuana and the signs ones are also missing. So the recommendation from the CD board would be, yes, we agree, put those back in where they belong in the zoning, and also put in the marijuana definitions and the sign definitions. And we're not making any recommendation of changing those definitions, just from the old ordinances to bring them back. And you can actually see, if you were to go to our current zoning right now, the marijuana section and the sign section both say definitions, see definitions, section 12.0 at the end, but there are no marijuana definitions in there, and there are no sign definitions in that section. So that would actually, the recommendation from the CD board would be, in addition to the ones you, the city council, are saying you want to put back, you should also put back these others.
Any questions on any of that before we talk about number 5?
That was a very helpful clarification, Alicia. That certainly makes a very strong case for it.
Right. Like, yeah, it was very funny. I had one of our developers was like, Alicia, we're trying to comply with your solar ordinance, but there are no solar definitions. And we went to the old version of the ordinance and there are definitions. Should we use those definitions? And I was like, oh my God.
And now the old ordinance isn't on Unicode anymore, which was my cheat to see was between the two. It's not there anymore. So you can't even refer people to that. I just have a really, really old paper bound copy that's been photocopied a gazillion times.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal. Yeah, so regarding number 5, which is clarifying and deconflicting which authority is the SPGA when there are multiple forms of relief. We had the majority of this language, I think, was reviewed by legal counsel. There's some cans of worms that could be opened. So I don't know if we can sever those 3 sections. I don't know, did we ever get an opinion? Are we permitted to do that? Or are we?
What do you mean by sever? So like in approving the.
Yeah.
So what will frequently happen in the city councils, they'll have a motion with, in this case, what is it, like 8 parts, right? They're numbered 1 through 8. And so they'll move to sever, and then they'll approve items 1, 3, and 6, and they'll table 2 and 4, and they'll deny 7, right? So or they may say there are 8 things in here, we love all 8 of them, and they approve the whole thing in one vote. So is that what you're asking about?
Yes, because we don't have the specific,
So we could advise them that our recommendation is that they sever the items and that they do not approve item 5 because we do not have appropriate language for them to vote on, but we recommend approving the other 7 items.
but I was wondering if we could even get more, drill down even more, because it was, a lot of it was, let's see. If I. Do I have to switch screens? Like, which screen do you guys see now? Do you see an ordinance or do you see the file still?
We still see the file. Yeah.
I'll share.
Right, so part of it, so the way the language that they had on there. Actually, I just want to open up the version that the council sent to us. City council paper zoning changes. So one of the things that we're gonna ask Clem, hey, surprise, Clem, we're gonna ask you to do is to write up, like, the recommendations are gonna be looking at what the council sent us, and then what is it that we're recommending, what's different. So what they sent us is this proposed amendment, amend the language throughout the ordinance, reflect the site plan review authority, blah, blah, blah. So we need to recommend back to them an actual language for them to adopt. They can't, the words, the paragraph that's on their motion is not like a legally accurate thing, right? They need to say, replace this language with that language, or replace this paragraph with that paragraph, or these items.
Yeah, so when we were basically that, to deconflict, to implement that amendment to the whole ordinance required going through all of this and making some changes. So what I did was change, instances where they specifically called out a board to rather switch it to SPGA, so Special Permit Granting Authority or Site Plan Review Authority. And pardon my scrolling, I'm just trying to go to where this track changes. Now I can make people dizzy. So the 3 sections which need some more consideration are these provisions for, so 6.1.10, which is this special permit. So the way it was written now was the SPGA or Community Development Board. It says, as the case may be, or made by special permit or site plan review, reduce or waive the requirements. Well, that was confusing because the CD board could be the SPGA, so it wouldn't be SPGA or Community Development Board. It should be, SPGA or the Site Plan Review Authority. So just making that switch would reduce some confusion. And anytime that you switch who the permit granting authority is in the table of use categories, you wouldn't have to go through and try to find everywhere where a specific board was called out. You would just know, okay, the SPGA for this use, go to the table, figure out who it is. Okay, now we know who it is. And there was like a lot of that dropped throughout that wasn't updated when the recodification happened. And I think the CD board was given some uses to become the SPGA and also became a site plan review authority for some uses, because they used to be, for those of you who are on the board before the recodification, there were site plan review special permits, and the recodification corrected that and made them just site plan reviews. You approve a site plan, it's not a special permit. So now they're normal site plan review approvals. But there's confusion because you don't want to put in language where we're giving authority to a planning board that the authority doesn't have, like you don't want to call something a waiver when it's really a variance. So it just requires a little bit more study and talking this through with the legal counsel, because I think it needs to be explained a little bit better what we're talking about, and it's becoming too of a time crunch, and I don't want to rush anything through that's going to be incorrect. So there was for signs, for landscaping, and for parking and loading requirements. There is the same provision allowing the SPJ or the site plan review authority to waive certain things. So they're not waiving, it's not waiving anything that's in the dimensional table. So you're not waiving, percentage of landscaping or open space. It would be like how the landscaping is provided, like, so screening, or whether you have that perimeter screening or a number of islands, that kind of thing, which I think makes sense in site plan review for a planning board to be able to waive some of those, because it's very site specific. Some things don't make sense. And having it go to the zoning board for a variance where the standard are so high, I don't think makes sense. So we need to really be careful with the language to, enable your board to waive certain standards that legally that you can. So we don't want to get into a situation where approvals are overturned or things like that. And so 6.2.20, this is for signs. There's currently a provision, as I was saying, special permit or site plan review to approve larger signs or additional signs. We want to make sure that the power is still be there. Again, just switching out CD board to site plan review authority throughout. So it just kind of keeps going on and on. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to keep scrolling until I find something else substantive. Oh,
So technically, if the city council was to vote on this, they would need to have each place this shows up and say, like, in 94 dash, the one on the screen, 6.4.12 waiver of standards, change, replace community development board with site plan review authority. In theory, you could list in these sections, all of the following sections, replace the phrase community development board with site plan review authority. But we would need to make that recommendation to them, because the way it was written on this paper wasn't that legally clear.
What
Because
about the
right, if you were, the difference between that and the DHCD one is the DHCD one is a wholesale, literally every time DHCD shows up, you're replacing with EOHL. Sorry, Jackie, I can't get it right.
I'm still getting it to EHOLC, Executive Office of Living
But
Rural Community.
it's literally a find and replace throughout the whole document, where in this case, you're replacing the phrase community development board with the phrase site plan review authority in some sections, but not literally every time it shows up in the document. Which is why you would actually have to list out every location. I don't know if that's helpful or more confusing or.
So Mike, a clarifying question for number 5. So the board's not able to vote on that one tonight because you still have to parse it out with the legal counsel to make sure that it's being presented properly, right? Even if you take out some of the information that you have there, it needs to be reviewed by legal first, correct?
Danielle, what do we feel? Do we think that it needs to be reviewed again? I mean, we've discussed it a few times with legal counsel. I'm not sure whether at this point we feel we need to go back to them. Because there's an option for the CD board to say, you know, we support the planning office's recommendation. When you determine exactly what those sections are, we support that. The planning board could say, we don't want to like leave it so loose right now. And so the recommendation to the city council would be to not take up this item at this time and to consider that in another round. You could recommend that the city council table this item until there's a more concrete recommendation from the planning office, but I'm not really sure how that works with the public hearing. Like, how does it, I think you have to close your public hearing to make a recommendation to the city council on all the other items. It is our recommendation that we do that tonight if we're feel good with the other items, because some of them, like the one about the principal structures, is actually kind of really urgently important to like Walkling Court, for example, right now. And there have been other things that have come up that are as well, like other multi-building things like that. And we're concerned about the auto uses and Mystic Ave. Right, like that's actually the reason that the city council took it up, is because there are places trying and looking at and shopping for new places to locate car dealerships and parking lots. And so we don't want them to be able to do that as of right now. So it is our recommendation that the ones that you're comfortable with, you vote out tonight and have them, and so they can vote on September 5th on them. And I think that's the open question, is what to do about this one. Unless, don't let me pressure you. If you are not comfortable with some of the others we've discussed, please say that. I'm just, because of the nods and the yeses, I'm just assuming that you are. So.
My only question, and that's for the board for deliberation, is that we understand that this is an interim step to hold over to zoning revisions, and you want to get these administrative changes done. And me as one board member, I can definitely vote on the other ones, but number 5, I thought that there was like a process legally that before we change anything, we just had to make sure we were okay with what we're changing. And I don't know that I've wrapped my full head around exactly what that is. And I don't know if the board has, but I would also be inclined to say that I could recommend approval once you figure it out, once the city staff figured it out.
Because it's really, it's language where one part of the ordinance will say this body approves this, and then another part of the ordinance will say, no, it's another body that approves this. So, and some of it is holdover language that wasn't updated. But you can't just like presume that.
Right, well,
it says like the CD board can't do this. What's like, well, the CD board is an SPGA for something. So why would you be saying city council or board of appeals? You know.
So I see this as sort of like, sometimes when we vote out a site plan review, there's a whole list of conditions. And then there's one that is, and you'll work this out with the city engineer. You'll work this out with the planning office, but that's a condition. Whatever you agree to with them is part of the condition of the site plan review, right? It's sort of delegating that piece of the authority. And so I guess there is you could consider this, if you're comfortable with this conceptually, that you're delegating it to the planning staff to come up with the exact legal language to reflect what we've discussed here. And that is what should go in the memo to the city council. But if you're not comfortable, like, I don't know that it has to. So in theory, this board could say, we don't have comment on any of these. We have no recommendation, and that could go to the board, to the city council and they can make zoning change. If this board failed to take action for 45 days, then the city council has the right to move forward without any recommendation from the zoning board. So that's sort of like where I'm saying, we could also say to them, we recommend that you don't, the board could say, we recommend that you don't change the language. And the council could say, well, we want to change it anyhow. Like, right? You're just making a recommendation to them. They probably wouldn't though, but they legally could.
So I'll open it up to the board now for clarifying questions and just to see exactly the temperature of where we're going with this and to see if there's any other questions that the board may have of Danielle. Danielle, if you're finished with your presentation, that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's real like technical nerdy zoning stuff,
Mm.
you know, that we're just trying to like clean up. Make our lives easier. Make, yeah.
Yeah, I think all of it makes sense. So everything you said, Danielle, and replacing the definitions, none of it seems like, yeah, it all just seems logical based on everything you guys have said.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I appreciated your analogy with leaving a condition in a site plan review, because that really did clarify that kind of we're not really leaving anything unaddressed. It's just that we need to recommend that this process be carried out the way it's going to be carried out, but we need to say we recommend it.
Agreed. I think this makes sense to me, and I was a little hesitant about the things we didn't know yet, but again, that analogy of I think makes me feel okay about passing it, and I agree that many of the important elements are quite time sensitive, so I would like to err on the side of action rather than saying nothing.
Danielle, on section 5, is there like a rule of thumb on who should do what when you're making these changes? Like whether it is the planning board or it is the CBD, like the way that you've explained the changes on the spreadsheets when it comes to amendments previously, they're so clear. But the only question would be on section 5, like what's your mindset and what are your ideas when changing who's doing what? Like whether it's a planning board, whether it is a CBD, how are you making these changes?
So it wouldn't be actually like changing anything. Basically, it's
clarifying,
reducing like reducing the confusion. So basically the new ordinance doesn't understand that not all uses need special permits now. Basically, they all did before, and that was one of the things that had to get fixed is you have to allow things, you know, by right. And it was because there was this quirky language in the ordinance that said, if this is by right and it's subject to a special permit or subject to site plan review. Oh, and by the way, if it's subject to site plan review, now it needs a special permit. It literally said something like that. Like,
okay,
by like, like regardless, it will now need a special permit. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm reading, I'm like, this is kind of nuts. But that, I mean, that was fixed, and I was glad to see that that was fixed.
Okay.
So basically, these sections don't contemplate that a site plan review authority would be like reviewing. So now it's not an SPGA. Because when you're a site plan review authority, there's no special permit that you're granting. So it starts to get kind of confusing. And so it's just, if the CD board is a site plan review authority, that you would be the ones waiving certain things. But the question is, you know, how do we do that in a way that's
more aligning roles, basically.
Right.
Aligning, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
If there's no more questions from the board, I'm gonna, because this is still a public hearing, I'm gonna open it up for public comment. I'm not sure that there's public on, but I will read. Those who wish to provide comments can use the raise hands feature or message Amanda in the comments. You can also send an email to medford-ma.gov. Before providing your comments, please state your name and address for the record. Amanda, can you please manage the public comment queue and read any previously sent emails or letters?
Sure thing. So there were no previously received comments. I'm just refreshing our inbox, but no new comments have come in. And I'll give folks a moment, but I don't actually think there are other members of the public on the call. So I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. I'm going to close the public comment period and go back to board deliberation. And I will just start by just, I will leave the floor open for the board members to add, but at this point, I appreciate the city's, all of the work that Danielle and other city staff has done in trying to identify these potential misaligned uses / roles and rectify it for ease for the city and ourselves. And before I ask for a motion, I will ask if there is anything that the board wants to add. If there's any language or anything that you want to change or. Okay, I'm going to ask for potential motion to recommend approval of the proposed zoning ordinance amendments to the city council with the condition of, Amanda, can you help me capture that language for number 5?
Yes, yeah, so there were 3 things that I took notes on, and they're a little scratchy, sloppy, so we can refine them, but just in concept, so again, disregard if this is not accurate, but for the item where it talks about adding definitions, so in addition to the definitions included in the paper, to also include definitions for the marijuana uses and signs in section 12.0 as one of the recommendations. Second was that the SPGA for the adjusted C2 uses be the CD board as opposed to city council. And third item, and I'm not entirely sure how to capture this, but one way forward would be to delegate to PDS staff that they update the language of item number 5 to kind of reflect what was discussed and to include that in the recommendation to city council.
Are there any objections? I do have one clarifying question on the marijuana and sign definitions. Maybe I didn't capture that one in my conditions. What was that one that we discussed for that?
So the city council in their, well, let's reinsert these definitions. They listed all those ones that are on your document. I actually went and found the sign ones in my paper copy. And there are like 4 pages of definitions here that are no longer found in our zoning. What's a roof sign? What's an outdoor advertising board? So to also include the sign definitions from the former version of the zoning, and to also include, so you were recommending to them that in addition to the ones that they're suggesting we put back in, they also include these. Clem, I hope we have some way to scan. We must have an electronic, I'm sure I have an electronic version of this, but if you can help us with that.
All I have is this thing. Is that
That's
what you
what's
have?
in front of me, but we may, at worst, we'll scan it in and do an OCR. You can help us with that.
I hope so.
That's the recommendation. And I mean, honestly, there was also the one about changing so like with the use table to also change the uses that Danielle recommended in addition to the ones that the city council had listed. And then also to make the CD board the special permit granting authority rather than the city council. So we may list out like these things, and then they'll have to say, yes, we agree, no, we don't agree on that one. Maybe they'll agree on everything. You never know until you ask.
So it would be like making a motion to delete the existing table and replace with the proposed table, or is that? or
We
is-
would recommend that they delete the existing table and replace it with the recommended table from the CD board. That would be the easiest.
All
Yes.
right, I'm
Yes,
gonna,
motor vehicle related uses table is what we saw. And the recommendation would be also to replace the miscellaneous commercial uses table, the wholesale transportation and industrial uses table, and accessory uses table. You could like as presented in this staff memo. Dated in the wee hours of this morning. Your hardworking planning staff. We have the motions.
okay, I'm going to try this again. Potential motion to recommend approval of the proposed zoning ordinance amendments to city council.
I so move.
I was gonna read the motions, just for public record. In addition to the definitions and with the following conditions, in addition to the definitions included in the paper, to also include the marijuana and signed definitions from the former zoning ordinances in section 12.0. Recommend that SBGA for the adjusted C2 uses be the CDB. For item number 5, delegate to the PDS to update the language reflecting what was discussed, included in the recommendation to the city council. Recommend that city council delete the existing tables and replace with the recommended table from the CDB as presented in the PDS staff memo. A motion?
For real this time.
A second motion?
Second.
Sally, I second.
All right, roll call. Vice Chair Emily Hedman,
I need to abstain from this, unfortunately.
and Peter, were you at, Peter, did you read this or?
I also need to abstain from this one.
Okay. Ari Fishman,
Yes.
Pam Mariansky,
Yes.
Sally Akiki,
Yes.
and myself, Jackie McPherson. Yes. That is unanimously accepted for recommendation to the city council. Thank you, Danielle, and Alicia and Amanda.
Thank you. All
Next
right.
item, board elections. So this is continued from 8/2/23, where we have reestablished a chair, myself, as well as Emily Hedeman is now the vice chair. And we still have a clerk position open and a community preservation committee representative open. And we were going to wait until we had full members to entertain those. As of right now, Ari Fishman is sort of in the CPA role. Are you currently in that, and you're looking to you're just holding it over until someone else is able to take it? And so those two positions are open. Amanda, can you give a little bit of background on both positions for the new board members?
Sure. So clerk position, I think we talked about this with a couple of members previously. So for those that are new, the clerk would be responsible for reading and reviewing the minutes prior to the meeting. They would not be responsible for generating the minutes. That falls to us, and in particular, Clem, our wonderful right-hand person, generating so many of these. So reading and reviewing the minutes just to make sure, for clarity and accuracy. And then a kind of new role, which we had sort of started talking about with the board, would be, as you saw tonight, I was doing a little bit of note taking on, as board members were deliberating over potential conditions and things for items. And we think it could be a best practice to, aside from staff, city staff doing some of that, to have a clerk be keeping notes on potential conditions for projects or approvals, as well as sort of a check. It's better to have two people on it than one, I think, and to make sure that everything is covered, and also, that the framing maybe for certain condition language is accurate or reflects where the board was coming from. So that's the clerk position in a nutshell. In addition to that, the Community Preservation Committee representative would be responsible for attending CPA, Community Preservation Act meetings, which happen roughly once a month. I believe it's the first Tuesday of every month. With some exceptions in the summer, I think they meet a little less frequently at this time of year. And
during funding round deliberations and voting, there might be an extra meeting or two, depending on the volume of applications, so that usually for the presentations, it would split it between two meetings, so that it's not, so long, and can digest it better. And then a meeting to vote. It's very important position. You have a lot of impact on what projects get funded with the CPA funds. It's a fun committee right now. They currently are still meeting remote. That could change. But I think that would be a decision of the committee as well.
And I want to say, I don't have the exact number, but I want to say the amount of funding that this committee is responsible for allocating or making recommendations to allocate is something close to $2 million. And it's gone to some very important and incredible projects, both from the city, but also other entities beyond the city and organizations can apply for funds. So there's been some really cool restorative work for the Royal House and Slave Quarters, for example. A lot of funding going towards car park renovation for the pickleball courts, which is there's a really robust community that's very excited about that. So just to kind of sprinkle a couple of projects for you all to get a sense of the kinds of things that are discussed by the committee.
Well, as housing, a lot of the funding goes towards affordable housing as well. So
you're making me feel bad that I'm nervous about committing to it. I kind of have some personal stuff that I'm expecting this year that means that I'm concerned about committing to 2 committees and being able to give them the effort that they deserve. If no one is in better personal situation and no one can do it, then I can, but I did want to make sure that we have the opportunity to have someone with enough capacity to give it its due.
And I hope you don't think we're trying to guilt you.
It's partially your job. I'm in no way mad about it.
I unfortunately don't think I can commit to another night a week, but I would like to throw my hat in the ring for clerk.
Thank you, Peter. Is there anyone else that would want to throw their hat in for clerk or either CPA representative?
I may have asked this last time, but is there any way the representative role could be rotating?
It's a little challenging because there's a funding round, and so for like one person to be at like one meeting at the, you know, the beginning of the funding round, and then for a new person to be evaluating those same projects later in the round, it might be tough. I think for continuity's sake, it makes sense to have one person, but something that could be the case, which hasn't been done previously, is, you know, instead of having someone for like their full CD board term commit to being the representative, you could rotate someone in every year. Ari, I think you're muted.
Yeah. What if we can maybe do that? I can keep it for now, and if I start reaching capacity and am not able to continue it, could there be some flexibility about passing it on? With kind of doing my best to make a commitment for a full funding cycle.
I personally don't see why not.
I think it'd be great to make it through a funding cycle, because that's really where the votes are important. And
Yeah.
then a lot of it, there's, you know, a lot of dead time where it's, let's approve the application, let's, you know, go over what our goals are and update the CPA plan. But the one thing I hesitate about making it just one person or 1 year terms is that we're trying to make sure that the terms are staggered, so it's not like so many people terming off, like the situation that we got with this board, where so many people termed off at once because the staggering got messed up somehow. And it's good to have some continuity and some experienced folks and new folks coming in, so there's, you know, the institutional knowledge still. There's a very strong chair right now, so it's not a lot of work for any of the members. There's a full-time staff person and a chair, and it really can be just a show up and vote role. Really, it's not a lot of work.
Okay, I'll do it.
And Ari, even if continuity is the goal, like, you know, anything can happen to any of us at any point,
course.
whether it's this board or others. So, you know, the person always comes first.
Oh, absolutely, but
yeah.
I don't think there's room
Yeah.
in our ordinance, in the community preservation ordinance that we have, that says 3-year terms.
Or else.
This is like, yeah, so
Yeah.
that we'll strive for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. And you know, it's an important committee.
Thank you, Ari.
They control so much money.
So much. If the CPC doesn't recommend approval, it doesn't make it to city council at all. Like, they don't see what you don't recommend. So it's not like we're gonna ignore, like, they can vote not to fund something that you wanted funded, but they can't approve to fund something that you did not want to fund. So there is some teeth there.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna start with a motion, to elect Peter Cowles as the clerk of the Medford Community Development Board.
Second.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Could someone make the motion besides Jackie?
Okay, I'll make
Oh,
the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, and that, I apologize, I misspoke. I'm looking for a motion.
Oh, and one thing that might be helpful, like in Somerville, the clerk is the person who always makes the motions. Like when I was on the zoning board, I was the clerk. I made the motions, I made them all. And so
Okay.
it was never like, who wants to make a motion? It was like you're there, you're prepared with your motion, you're prepared with the conditions. And it
Okay.
just goes very efficiently. So if that wanted to be what the clerk person.
Peter, you're not the clerk yet.
Yeah, we haven't, we got
I
him
like that
now,
idea.
Danielle. We got him, we don't want to scare him. When I said-
Yeah, you should have waited till after he got
I know,
elected
I
before you
know.
told him that part.
Be like, Mr.
Teething.
Clerk, can I have a
The
motion?
teething.
Yeah.
Okay, so Amanda, what you were saying is someone else to make a motion or, okay,
I'll make a motion to elect Peter Calvis as clerk of the Medford Community Development Board.
a second
I
motion?
second. Sally, I second.
Roll call, Vice Chair Emily Hedeman,
Aye.
Peter Cowles for himself,
Aye.
Ari Fishman,
Aye.
Pam Mariansky,
Aye.
Sally Akiki,
Aye.
Sharad Barachara,
Aye.
and myself, Jackie McPherson. Aye. Is there a motion to make Ari Fishman the Community Preservation Committee representative? Since they have only been sitting in it as a holdover, but now it's official.
So moved.
Second.
A roll call, Vice Chair Emily Hedeman,
Yes. Aye.
Peter Cowles,
Aye.
Ari Fishman, for themselves.
Yes.
Pam Mariansky,
Yes.
Sally Akiki,
Aye.
Sharad Barachara,
Aye.
and myself, Jackie McPherson. I'm an aye. Thank you both. Okay, so now our next item is approval of minutes from 7/5/23 and 7/19/23. Before we make a motion, I want to note to Amanda, on 7/19/23, I believe it's item 7 for board elections. The very last item was not completed.
Very sorry about that. I must have, let me see. For item 7, you said,
Yes, for board elections.
board elections. Oh, shucks.
Perfect example where the clerk would have read it, made that edit, and then it would have gotten sent around.
But I think it's so close to being finished because there were no
Yes.
votes. So I think if there were no other major concerns with those minutes, there could be a motion to, for staff to complete the phrasing, but then to accept with that edit.
A motion to approve 7/5/23, the minutes of 7/5/23, and then 7/19/23 with the edits as the staff finishes them, edits them.
So moved.
A second motion,
Second.
I see the second to the other person who spoke.
okay. Vice Chair.
I sniped it from you, Ari. Yes.
Roll call, Vice Chair Emily Hedeman,
Yes.
Peter Cowles,
Yes.
Ari Fishman,
Yes.
Pam Mariansky,
Yes.
Sally Akiki,
Yes.
Sharad Barachara,
Yes.
and myself, Jackie McPherson, I'm an aye. The final item on the board tonight is an update from the city staff on the status of the MBTA zoning. I'm inviting Danielle Evans again to provide an update to the board on the status of the MBTA zoning.
Yes, so a lot of this has been going on in the background. It was a lot of crunching numbers. We worked with Ezra Glenn, who was the consultant provided by the state for free, thankfully, because they knew we all had our hands full with this. This is one of the handful of rapid transit communities. We have tightest time frame to comply, just a year. It's funny how the more complicated communities get the shortest timeline. Some have 3 years, we get 1. So basically, it's, as I was saying before, that the state is mandating that we create the zoning districts that allow housing by right, or multifamily housing by right, which so it's units, 3 units or more at a very prescribed density, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I wanted to say it was like 6,000 something units, something like that. With which 75% of that has to be within the half-mile radius of a transit station. And there's a lot of parameters around that. You can't count excluded land, which so some of the stations that we're looking at, because we actually have a lot of stations that could be eligible, but when you look at the surrounding land, like the Medford Tufts station, Tufts University owns so much of that, that there was not enough land within the half-mile to actually put a district over there. So it's not going to work. We looked at, and then the other ones are basically mostly it's Somerville, so it would be a very small sliver of land, and it would have to be kind of parsed about. Basically, we landed on the Wellington Orange Line station is really the only feasible area that we could have create this district. So our approach is going to be an overlay. So it would be, an overlay which it wouldn't replace the underlying zoning. You could still do the underlying zoning, but the overlay would create this multifamily by right. Some of the limitations are that we're not allowed to require ground floor retail or require deeper affordability. Even our existing inclusionary housing provisions that we have now actually aren't allowed. We have to have an economic feasibility analysis to justify them. So that's currently being done right now, thankfully also for free by MAPC. And they are pretty certain that they will be fine, that we'll be able to allow our greater percentages than is allowed. Because the state, first they said you can't have inclusionary zoning at all. And everyone like threw a fit, like including myself, like, what are you talking about? Because it's viewed as, some of like the suburbs will use that as kind of a barrier to creating affordable housing or multifamily housing by creating these such strict requirements that makes building just not feasible at all. And so they wanted to make sure that communities weren't including these inclusionary zoning ordinances or bylaws like in bad faith. So we have to prove that what we already have won't hurt development or slow it down. And while we're having them do this EFA, we wanted them to look at, well, we kind of wanted to make changes to it anyways. We wanted to have like, different like tiers of affordability. What if some of them were 60% area median income, some at 80, some at 100, rather than all at 80? Could that be something that we could do that could get approved? So they're also going to look at like 1 or 2 alternatives. And so we're hoping to have them finalize that. I think it was going to be early fall. So we're operating under the assumption that it'll be allowed, but we won't know for sure until maybe a month or 2. But we're going to hold a public input hearing on the 13th of September. And be great. I believe we're gonna do it on Zoom. And we're gonna be getting a press release out shortly and spreading the word about that. And basically the input that we're gonna be seeking is what kind of density bonuses that we could put into our zoning to incentivize some of our other goals. Because this, you know, the MBTA zoning, the way it was, is basically just production without, you know, pay attention to some of the other goals, like some of our climate resiliency goals, affordability goals, you know, walkable, mixed use, neighborhood kind of goals that we have outlined in our comp plan that we can't require. So we'll have our overlay, which will allow by right this required density, which is actually not that dense. We already do allow quite a bit of density. So in some areas, it'll actually be like down zoning, which seems odd. So basically it's like, okay, you're allowed to put a 4-story building by right, but if you want 6, then you need to provide ground floor retail or deeper affordability, things like that, or a parking reduction. If you know, provide this other provision that we would want to further some of our other goals. So we have some staff looking at that. We have a climate planner who is doing some research on incorporating those sorts of things into zoning anyways, to give them teeth. So we're hoping to use some of that and bring them as incentives and density bonuses, and we'll be looking for input from the public and from you all, you know, what you think would be appropriate, what is, if you do X, what is a proportionate bonus from that? So we'll be doing a lot of research for that. And then, so then after the public input meeting, we'll actually then start the public hearings to amend zoning. So the first community development board meeting would be scheduled for October 18th. We kept room in our timeline to allow for 2 CD board meetings if you need it, and 2 city council meetings if they need it. So
Danielle, are you recommending that if board members are available for the public meeting, that it would help, they could, by viewing that, they could both get a preview of everything that they're going to hear at the CD board meeting in less technical terms, and then they could hear directly some of any resident questions and concerns, and that might help with only needing to have 1 CD board meeting, because it might be the first public hearing, but the board members would hear it at the public meeting. And if members did that, I would just recommend that board members reserve their comments for in private or at the public hearing in order to avoid open meeting law violation, right? If like 4 of you showed up at that meeting and 1 of you made a comment, that's technically an open meeting law violation, because you're discussing a matter that is expected to be in front of you, right? Without it being a publicly posted meeting that you would be doing that. Whereas if any of you went to that meeting and had concerns or questions, we would really want you to come talk to us about them in advance of waiting for this public hearing, right? And I'm actually going to say that if at any point, this is probably just a general good comment, there's something that's coming in front of you and you've looked at it, or you have information and you're like, oh, I don't like this, or I'm really concerned about this, or I'm super confused about it. Reaching out to Amanda or myself or Danielle, more Danielle, because Amanda's transitioning off this board. I'm going to keep saying that until it's true. and discussing it before the meeting, we absolutely welcome that. Because we'd love to address any real deep concerns, big concerns in advance. If it's like they need more trees, please just do it at meeting, right? If you're like, why are they doing this project at all? Definitely reach out to us before the meeting. But that's with the zoning. When I'm saying like, come to the public meeting, but don't comment. I'm not telling you you can't comment. I'm saying, please don't do it in the public meeting and violate open meeting law.
And I also want to give a shout out to Clem, who's been also very helpful in picking up where Ezra's contract ended and helping us to verify that we meet all the density targets parcel by parcel.
Thank you.
And if you guys have any ideas or thoughts, please reach out to me at any time. Yeah, we haven't wanted this to be this process that was like happening like behind closed doors, but there hasn't been anything really to present yet. And a lot of communities have kind of been in the same boat. They're like, well, we want to have public input, but we need to present them with something because a lot of it is not up for negotiation. Like it's mandated and very prescriptive. And we're taking the approach of, making it work for Medford because, we have a lot of other goals in addition to housing with much more robust affordability goals than the 3A even allows. And I feel like we have been doing a really good job of producing housing. And we don't want that housing underwater if we don't encourage things like electrification of buildings. So we're trying to kind of, I'm getting tired. My brain is stopping to work. It's taking a very creative approach to do this.
Thank you, Danielle. Are there any questions before we go to the next item? I sort of was premature in saying that that item, Danielle's item, was the final one. We also have.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, go right ahead, Ari.
Wanted to thank Danielle planning staff for all their hard work on figuring out what's going on and how we can best do it and bringing that creativity. So thank you all. I'm sure it's frustrating, but it's really great.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting with the MBTA zoning. It's like where I work hand in hand with Chris Clutchman, who's behind the MBTA zoning law and how she sort of defines it and things like that. So when those questions come up for a grantee or somebody that's in my my actual portfolio, I refer to Chris, like, Chris, you got this one? So it's like, okay, now I'm in Medford. It's like, now it's like, I have to look at it as, we have all these cities and towns coming to us, trying to have them explain it in the context of their communities. And now I have to try to figure out in the context of my own community. So very interesting, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know on the private consulting side, we're still trying to figure out how we have to work through those kind of projects as well. So
yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when especially with some of the communities, as you said, it has to be community specific, and it's like they come in and they say, well, you're taking away our ability to do like you said, ground floor retail. And it's like, we need this commercial base. Like, why is it with this law? And you guys, you did this. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. It's like, so now I'll be that same person screaming back at the state, like, why'd you do this? All right, so again, thank you, Danielle. So number 8, miscellaneous and other updates from the city.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I just thought I'd give a quick precursor to our next meeting, which is scheduled for September 6th. We are expecting to see a site plan review for a proposal at 421 High Street with some residential units. And we will see the first PDD public hearing for Walkland Court. So those are two upcoming items that are for sure, and I think we will possibly also see the continued Bank of America special permit conversation that's for the project proposed in the Wegmans Plaza. I think those are the main items. I'll keep it short.
Thank you, Amanda.
I feel like I should mention something that's not on the agenda, just as an FYI. Stop me if you guys mentioned this while I was thinking about something else. Combined Properties, the hearing where they withdrew. So they have actually submitted a draft life science park overlay proposal. They sent it to the city council president and to the mayor. They CC'd me. The city council president and the mayor have both kind of said to me, what do we do with this? And so I have reached out to them to discuss it with them, but I just thought you all would want to know what they were thinking. And if you'll forgive me to do this moment, Clem, can you ask me about that too? Because a great exercise would be to compare this to the PDD they submitted, unless Danielle's already done it. I just haven't. It would be awesome to have you just tell me what's different between this and what they submitted before.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't look at it too closely because I was like, what is this?
Yeah, so they have told me, I did reach out to them. I said, is this an official submission to the city council? And they said, no, it's a draft for discussion. So I just wanted you all to know they're still interested in the project. They're still talking about it. If anybody, once we do know what's different from this and what the PDD that you saw, I would also welcome to hear like individually, because this is not an agenda item for tonight, but if people have thoughts on that project that you had wished you had gotten to express at that meeting, Danielle and I would like to hear them. You can reach out to us privately so that we can incorporate any thoughts into a conversation with Combined Properties on this. So,
yeah, the first thing that jumped out to me was a sentence in there that the landscaping requirements wouldn't apply. And I would just,
yeah, they're not getting that.
yeah, I just closed my laptop. I was, what is this? I got fired up or something.
And I'm sorry to butt in, guys. I just had to thought that, so city council had a meeting last night and they heard 243 Mystic PDD as well as 100 Winchester PDD. 243 got referred back to CD board as part of our process. So you guys will see that in the near future. And 100 Winchester did get adopted, the zoning. So yay, first phase of that project done. Very much thanks to you all. And we will likely see a special permit application from them in the future. So yeah, some fun news.
Awesome.
And just because you all will be interested, the 40, the 40B was past the the challenge date, the whatever that's called, and passed a few days ago. The date by which somebody the appeal date.
Appeals.
The appeal date passed a few days ago with no appeals. And they were in front of Conservation Commission tonight, and they got their Conservation Commission approvals this evening. And they had some conservation, there were some old open orders of conditions that got cleared up as well for them. So all of the permitting for that project has now cleared. Now they can apply for their building permit, which now they can apply as of right because they went through all the variances and everything. So that'll be moving soon.
Anything else?
Well, hearing nothing else, from the city, thank you all. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Roll call. Vice Chair Emily Hedman,
Aye.
Peter Cowles,
Aye.
Ari Fishman,
Aye.
Pam Mariansky,
Aye.
Sally Akiki.
Aye.
Right, and I'm gonna try one more time because I've been remiss in pronouncing your name correctly, Sharad. Sharad Barachayar? Did I get it right?
Vajracharya.
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 All right, that's better.
Okay, okay, Vajracharya.
Thank you. Aye.
Okay. And myself, Jackie McPherson. I'm an aye. And we are adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.